Hey, this is Wes Candle with the AE Tuts. Today I'm going to show you guys how to make something like this. Alright, now that may seem really complicated at first, but I promise it's really not. In fact, if you can edit a good piece of video together, a nice cohesive piece of video together, then you should be able to make something similar to this. Obviously, it's not going to be exactly the same because unless you're using the same music and the same footage, you're not going to get the same thing. And you'll understand why as I begin to explain this a little more, but let me go ahead and show you exactly how I created this. And to do that, let's go ahead and just click here on Create New Composition and just create a new comp, and we'll just call this Test. It's 1280 by 720 square pixels. Hit OK. And the way I created the effect is I used a plugin called Form by Trapcode, and it's a very popular plugin, and a lot of tutorials have been written about it. But let me just show you exactly how Form works. Go ahead and hit Command Y on your keyboard. And let's change it to black. I like to, for some reason, have all my plugins black, so I don't know why, but we'll name it Form. Hit OK. And we actually need another layer to drive the particles within Form. So we'll hit New, and this is another way to bring up a solid, but hit New Solid instead of Command Y, and we'll do white on this one. And name this one Ramp. Okay. And I've already typed in ramp in effects and presets, so we can just double click on ramp and add we'll make this invisible here. And as you can see on the ramp layer, we've added a ramp or a gradient for you graphic designers out there. I still call it a gradient. Anyway, one of the ways that Form allows you to move particles around or to displace them in 3D space is with grayscale values of another layer, okay? And that actually becomes really, really powerful if you start to mess around with this. Like, basically what it does, it takes the black value and moves it to a certain position on X, Y, or Z, and let's just say Z. So let's say it moves it back 100 pixels or 200 pixels, and brings the white value forward 200 pixels, and basically what you get is a smooth ramp, okay? Which is, maybe the reason why they call it a ramp instead of a gradient. I don't know. I'm just guessing. Anyways, let's go ahead and just put this into practice and go up to Effects and Presets, type in Form, and we'll add it to our Form layer. And make it visible again. And this is what Form looks like when it first pops up. Just for the sake of showing you guys, we'll hit New Camera and 35 millimeters. Okay. We'll bring up our unified camera tool, and this is what Form looks like when you first bring it up. Okay. 3 squares. And those squares are actually made up of a series of particles. Let me go into the settings here for Form, and you can kind of see how this base Form twirl down area can affect what this looks like. Let me go back to Selection Tool. Now, if we change the base, the size setting actually determines how big these squares are. So I'll mess around with that as soon as we take our camera away. Let me show you one thing here first before I do that. Particles in Z, particles X and Y. Okay, this basically tells you how many particles are across in the X direction, up in the Y direction, and back in the Z direction. Okay, we're fine with having a bunch of particles. As you can see, as I move that up, it just becomes brighter. Okay, particles in Z, however, is a little more interesting because it gives you more layers. Okay. Now, for this example, we only need one, okay? But for what you're doing, you may need a bunch. And as you can see, if you get a little creative with this, you can go nuts. I mean, if we make it 70 like the others, you've basically got a nice thick cube of particles that become very hard for your processor to render. Anyways, we'll just go back to 1. And we've got our single layer here. And I'm going to remove the camera because we need to look at this thing directly on. We'll put a camera back in here in a little bit. But go ahead and hit delete. And basically, let me just go down the list, and I'll show you exactly how I set up my composition, and then show you what I put behind it in order to drive the moving particles. It's so easy. It's amazingly easy. This is one of the more popular videos that I've made, and it's one of the easiest things. I did it in like a day, so it just kind of hit me. I was trying to learn form basically, and came up with that. So let's go ahead and start putting in some numbers here. For size X, we'll put in 1280. Hit tab, and as you can see, it now stretches out across. Go back to selection tool. It stretches out across the size of the comp, and that's because the size of the comp is 1280 pixels wide. Okay, so I'm literally matching the width because I want the pixels or the particles to take up the entire width of the piece. For size Y, we'll match the other dimension, 720. And size Z, we can leave it 200. Now, particles in the Y, on my composition, I had set to 700. Or sorry, particles in the X. And particles in the Y were set to 500. I didn't want it to be completely, totally dense, but I wanted the particles pretty much to take up the entire space. I wanted it to be pretty thick. Particles in Z, as we mentioned, is the amount of layers, and then the center we'll leave in the center. The rotation values just rotate this thing around, as you can see, and we'll leave that alone too, and we'll leave any kind of rotation to the camera. And again, this is a creative exercise. I'm showing you the settings I did, but ultimately, in order to get a good result with different footage and a different piece of music, you're going to have to be creative with this. So there's no cookie cutter, just plug in the numbers thing that's going to allow you to get exactly what I got. In fact, it'll even get down to the actual frequency of sound. I chose to sample the audio at 20 hertz, okay? And you could choose somewhere between 20 and 20,000 to sample your audio, okay? And that's going to change the outcome. So, again, what I do is I just, slide up and down on these numbers, and that's what you're going to have to do too. But I'm going to hopefully give you a good foundation to get started on. All right. Let's twirl down the particle area, and we'll change our sphere feather to 88. And basically that's just taking our individual particles and kind of making them a little more fuzzy, which, again, that's a creative decision. The size, we'll have it 2. And so now it's actually taking up a little bit more, and it looks like there's no particles there, when in reality we have 350,000. Now opacity, size random, opacity random, I'll leave the same. And we're going to actually change our color. And I want it to be just a little bit on the yellow side. Let's have it a little more orange yellow. Just kind of in that direction, just so there's just a little color. You're really not going to see a whole lot of change right now, and the reason why is because honestly it's in add mode. If I put it into normal, you can see, but add mode makes it so that all the colors are adding up to white, so when they overlap, this is what you get. But as they separate and disperse, you'll get a little more color, and again, that's just something it'll become a little more clear as we move on. Okay, now let's go to audio react. Okay, now this is one of the more important parts here. Okay, for the first audio reactor, actually we need to go ahead and add our music. The piece of music that I've got here is actually it's called Tales from the Pigs, by one of my favorite French electronica groups, Teenage Bad Girl. their work is amazing. It's the song that I used, and again, you can pick anything you want, but this song is particularly awesome. So anyways, we've got our audio layer dragged in there, and let's go back to effects and controls, click on form, and just go back down to audio layer, audio react, and we need to select our audio layer. So just click there and select tails from the pigs, and let's just start changing the numbers around, and we'll get this audio to start working. Okay, for reactor 1, let's change the frequency to 20 hertz, the width to 100, the threshold to 100, and the strength to -80. And we want to map this to disperse, and then the delay direction from Y top to bottom. And this stuff will make a little more sense whenever I actually hit play and you can see what these settings are doing. And I'll go back through and kind of hopefully hit some of these things. Okay, for reactor 2, we need to set time offset to 0, frequency to 100. We'll go width 90, threshold 50. I think that's what it was, and strength 100. And then we're going to map it to a fractal, okay? And for those of you who aren't familiar with a fractal, basically this is what it is. We'll hit Command Y, just do a white solid, go to Effects and Presets, type in fractal, add fractal noise. That's a fractal, okay? And again, like the ramp that I showed you guys earlier, it's just a random set of black and white values, shades of gray, that are going to drive a parameter within form. Okay, form just happens to have its own fractal generator instead of having to create it using something like fractal noise. Okay, so that's what that is. So we'll just delete that and go back to form. So again, that's what we're dealing with as far as it's creating a fractal layer, and that's what it's using to offset some of these particles. Okay, now we'll don't really have to do anything with reactor 3. I had played around with some of these numbers, but I decided to take it off, so that's why these numbers are going to be different than what you have. But these are actually off. Reactor 4 we leave off, and reactor 5 I wanted to adjust the particle size, and this could actually be done on reactor 3. I was just, again, messing around with these parameters. And again, the way I work is I will sit here and slide these things back and forth and just watch and adjust based on what I see. It's a good way to learn these programs. And as you can see, form is just, it's like a program within a program. I mean, just to learn this thing and all the parameters it's just such a daunting task. So, but anyways, these numbers that we're plugging in here could be plugged into 3. So again, I'm plugging in reactor 5, but so anyways, 0, 100, 50, 0, and then the strength to 0.2. We want to adjust the particle size just slightly, and we can leave it at X left to right. Now, why are we not seeing anything? Well, first of all, it's because the music hasn't started. But if I hit play on the timeline, nothing will happen because it takes forever to render. But if I go further in, I mean, we should be seeing something happening to these particles, and we're not. Okay, that's because the main thing that should be happening, and this was actually a little confusing when I first did it, but the main thing that should be happening is dispersion. Okay, according to the 20 hertz frequency that's shooting through that music. Now, the reason why the disperse parameter is not doing anything is actually because you have to go down here to disperse and twist and turn it on. Okay, so we'll change it from 0 to around 250. And we'll hit 0 for RAM preview. And as you can see, we've got some action happening. Okay. Now, again, I've got that ramp behind it, and the particles are white, so you can only see what's happening up here. Now, the last thing we need to do in order to fully set this thing up is to have this not only influenced by the audio layer, but also influenced by the ramp layer. Okay, and again, I'm only using the ramp layer as an example of what you can do. I'll go and I'll show you exactly what I made to sit behind the form layer and actually push these particles around. But for now, we'll just use the ramp as an example, and we can kind of make it a little more complicated as time goes on. But let me go ahead and turn the form layer off and tell you a little something about After Effects. Okay, now if I was to go in and have the form layer look at this ramp layer to try and take from it these values of black to white, it actually wouldn't do anything. Okay, and that has something to do with the render order inside of After Effects. After Effects actually will not render the ramp layer in time for the form layer to look at it and then gain this information. So you actually have to trick the ramp layer into rendering the ramp before it renders the particles inside a form. So the way that we do that is we actually have to pre-comp the ramp layer, and the way that you do that is you hit Command-Shift-C, and we want to move all our attributes, which means that we're taking that ramp effect in with us into a new composition, and we can just name this ramp as well, and hit OK. And now we're basically baking that ramp or that gradient inside of this layer, and form will be able to look at it and glean the information. So if you don't pre-comp this guy, you will actually run into a problem, and it won't work. So all right, now that that's been said, and we've got all of our audio layers set to kind of blow these guys out of the water, and we need to adjust some more parameters. And those parameters would be under the layer map section. Okay, so we've got our ramp layer pre-comped. Okay, so it can actually do something. Now we just need to point it to that layer. So what we do is go to Color and Alpha, and we have it look at ramp. And we change our functionality from A to A, and then map over X to Y. So that's X and Y, so that's how we're mapping it. All right, for displacement, we actually want to set our functionality from RGB to XYZ to individual XYZ, so we can have a little bit more control. And we want to map that again over X to Y. And we don't want to do anything for layer X or layer Y, but for Z, we want to point this again to our ramp layer. Okay, and our strength, let's make that at -200. All right, for size, let's have it look at the ramp layer again, map over X and Y. And fractal strength, we won't have our ramp layer affecting that. And disperse, we won't have that either. Now, this is now set up exactly how I set up my composition on the war video. Okay, so if we make our ramp invisible and form visible, what you now see is a reaction occurring based on the audio and we'll call it the video layer that's sitting behind it. Okay, now let's begin to play around, and you can kind of see how this is affecting it. First thing I want to do is I want to move the camera. First we need to create a camera, new camera, hit OK, and let's move the camera just kind of over here. You can see that even though we had a single layer in the Z space, we now have quite a thick layer of particles there. Okay, so we'll just get rid of those camera moves, hit Command Z twice. Okay, now let's begin to play around in this ramp area. And you can really begin to see the power of using a grayscale value behind this thing to push it around. So let's double click on ramp to open it up, and let's just add, let's just add some text. Let's see, I don't know, AE tuts. I don't know why I would want to use that. And let's make it pure white. All right, we'll go back to test. And it's dispersing like crazy, so we'll hit J. And now the magic is happening. Let's use that camera tool again and just pan around, and you can really begin to see how those grayscale values are affecting the Z position of our layer. I mean, so that's like really cool, right? Okay. Command Z to bring it back. Let's just do a quick RAM preview. You can kind of see what we've got. All right. Now, it's doing something, that's for sure. But I think I actually forgot to hit a setting here. So let's go back into Form and look at our audio react. I did. I need to set a delay on reactor 1. All right, and that's going to add a lot of dynamic, a very dynamic look to this. So instead of 0, let's just make the delay 1. And that's where you get that kind of bad TV look. Now there's also one other thing that I didn't do, and there's a displacement parameter down here at the bottom called spherical field. And again, you can take this or leave it, but for some reason at the time I felt like it needed to be a little bit more displaced. So what you're going to see is you're going to kind of see this bulge begin to appear here in the center. So if you want this, you can do it. If not, don't feel like you have to, but I like it. So 542.5 in the radius area, and leave it at a feather of 50. Oh, and we have visualized fields, so that's why that red appeared, so we'll turn that off. Strength of 22, and again, I'm kind of reading off of a card here. So, all right, so this, let's do a RAM preview here, and you can kind of see a little more similar to what I had in my other. All right, now you might be sitting there saying to yourself, you know, Wes, this is not as cool looking as the other video you made. Okay, this doesn't have quite the excitement or dynamic feel. The reason for that is because I'm using a ramp layer in the background, and well, AE Tuts is exciting, but it's really, there's nothing else going on in the background layer to kind of add a dynamic, you know, feel to this thing. Okay, and that's where the creativity comes in. You've got this plugin Form sitting on top, and all you need to do is go in and create a grayscale edit of some kind to push these particles around. Let me go ahead and just show you exactly what I did when I created this thing. Under example, I've got the actual video edit, or what you would know as the ramp layer. In fact, let's go ahead and put it in. Double click on the ramp layer, bring it up, and instead of, you know, this gradient with AE Tuts, you can put in a, I don't know, old World War II videos with war and a trap code particular preset, and just edited this actually right here. Let me explain this. If you know anything about 3D, this is actually a 3D model of a plane, as you can see, that I took into, I believe it was Cinema. It might have been actually, it was Cinema 4D, and I rendered out what's called a depth pass. Okay, and what a depth pass does, and I had this in mind, this using a form in mind. But what a depth pass does is it takes the objects that are closest to you and renders them out in white, and as they get further away, goes closer and closer to pure black. Okay, and as you know, now that you've watched this tutorial, form uses those values to create position. Okay, so again, this is just what the my edit looked like in the background. Okay, again, this is random video from YouTube and a generic 3D character, but you know, this is just what was in the background. So now, if we go back to test and we render out our layer, do a RAM preview, you can see it's a little more interesting. All right, now that looks cool, right? Okay, so last but not least, all we have to do is just add kind of those finishing touches that make any video look great. The first of which is to add a vignette around the outside. Okay, so what we do is hit Command Y, I'll make a black solid, name it vignette, hit OK, and go out to this the shape layer and hit ellipse tool, and then just double click, and it will create an ellipse mask. Okay, now go to the mask, and we want to change it from add to subtract. Feather the crap out of that thing. Take the expansion back just a little bit. Go to toggle switches and modes and just change it to, I don't know, screen. You can't really see much there, but let's go to a more full screen area. It may not be doing anything, but I just do it. Anyway, another thing that you want to do too is add a new and then adjustment layer. And sorry if this is going off the screen, but just hit new and adjustment layer, and we'll go ahead and just do, let's see, curves and tint. And let's do tint before curves, actually. All right, and lower the tint amount to 20%. And RGB, let's go to red. Kind of bump it up just a little bit, add some color. Go to green, we pull that back. Go to blue, pull it back just a little bit. Make it more of an orange. Okay, and then we want to turn on motion blur. Now, I haven't been working with motion blur on this whole time because frankly, it takes forever to render that many particles with motion blur. But for my video, I did. And let's do a quick RAM preview and show you exactly what it looks like. All right, there you have it in all of its color corrected, vignetted, layer mapped, audio mapped glory. I hope this wasn't too convoluted for you guys, and I hope you enjoyed it. If you have any questions, please feel free to write me or comment, ask questions on the forums. I look at those, and I will try to respond to you. I hope you liked it. Again, my name is Wes Candle. Feel free to take a look at my blog at wescandle.com, and I'll see you next time. Thanks.